Okay, so we are back on. So welcome back. We lost our live stream there for a second. I believe at the point of the sheriff's update. So briefly, the sheriff has offered his resignation to be effective on December 20th, 2023, and is recommending the appointment of Captain Samuel Elliott for his replacement. So I know it's probably, we've been talking with you about this for weeks, but I'm sure that you go through a range of emotions. But I just wanted to say that your job is not easy. And certainly we've been through a lot of ups and downs over the past just 3 years, and that's a small portion of your long career. So I've appreciated the relationship that we have developed, the relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the board. We've been through some really crazy stuff between COVID and Measure 114 and all of these things that nobody could have anticipated. And I'm really excited for you because I think that what I've witnessed as part of your work is that you have a passion for really taking the knowledge that you've learned and applying it statewide and helping to influence positively statewide policy. So this does seem like a natural progression and a natural fit for you. So I'm really excited for you that you earned this position, and definitely thankful for the decades of service that you've put in Yamhill County.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that your people skills are unparalleled. And I think that in this new role, you're really going to be able to advocate, I think, for the counties. And so I appreciate that, and also appreciate your recommendation, because I don't think we could do better. I mean, Captain Elliott is exemplary and well-respected, and it's just an absolute honor to be able to join in with your recommendation. So we wish you the best. Thank you for, and probably a highlight of your time here for me was the appreciation of watching you testify in Salem against Senate Bill 941. Mm-hmm. And I hope you'll bring that advocacy for Second Amendment issues into OSSA, because I think, as we're seeing now more than ever, we really need to have an advocate at that level for our sheriffs. So thank you. And congratulations to Captain Elliott.
Thank you.
So I do want to make a motion to you were going to have the legal language ready.
I have some language here if the board's ready to.
Well, I want to make a motion first, and then I want to say a few words about Captain Elliott.
The motion would read: the consideration of appointment of Sam Elliott to fill the position of the Yamhill County Sheriff effective December 1st, 2023 through January 6th of 2025.
Okay, so moved. And I think that we have all had the opportunity to meet with Captain Elliott individually and talk about this potential role. I know I spent quite a bit of time going through concerns and positives, things that Sheriff Svensson has done and implemented that are really great for our county. And I have to say that my impression of Captain Elliott is that he is a humble servant and he knows the weight and the gravity of this position. You have felt it. And what my impression was that he understands that and he's ready for it. So I absolutely agree with your recommendation.
Thank you.
And because of, in the sake of having continuity and, planning and preparation in this time between now and the 21st, I think that we should appoint today.
I agree. But before you go, and I ditto the sentiment of the chair and Commissioner Starrett, and appreciate the service that you've given over the years. But what I'd like to mention is, over the years, even before I was commissioner, the engagement that you've had above and beyond the service to this county with two programs that I've been involved with you on would be the coat drive and the shop with a sheriff. And I just appreciate even on top of the tough job that you had, you still had time to have attention to those programs. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Agreed. I just want to add one more thing. In terms of conversation with Captain Elliott, I asked him some pretty tough questions. And the takeaway for me is that this county will be in good hands after you leave us, because he is willing to take a tough stand to represent and to defend the Constitution of the state and the country in this county. And now more than ever, that's a really tough assignment. So we appreciate that, and we appreciate your recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor of appointing Captain Samuel Elliott to serve as the interim, technically the interim sheriff, correct? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign? Great. Congratulations and
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Can we get a picture? Okay, it looks like we are moving into our work session. And for our work session today, we have a review and discussion of rural broadband. And I believe we have a presentation by HR Green. Yep.
My name is Ben Luis Ramirez. I am a broadband deployment consultant for the civil engineering firm HR Green. Thank you very much for making the time for me to speak with you today. I appreciate it very much. I have a presentation to show you that will walk through the work that HR Green has been engaged in for since this past spring with county staff to improve broadband access in Yamhill County. Do I have, forgive me here for the technical issue, but I'm not seeing a button on my Zoom window that will allow me to share my screen.
Just give us a minute, Ben. We're going to promote you as a panelist so that way you can present.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Are you seeing it now, Ben?
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just get my deck pulled up in the right window. We'll get started. Okay. So this past spring, Yamhill County engaged HR Green to perform a broadband study that would lay the groundwork for a re-granting program to initiate or assist the public sector in making a business case to build to unserved and underserved residents of the county. So in this presentation, I'll walk you through the work that we did as part of this project. I'll begin by just giving a very brief high-level overview of what broadband is. I'll discuss the current state of broadband in Yamhill County. I'll get into the vision for the project and kind of what our focus was. I'll discuss the outreach work that we did and the engineering work that we performed, which will which produced the cost figures that we'll then use to inform the master plan that we're producing for you and the regranting program that we will be rolling out. So first things first, broadband is generally described using two numbers. One represents download speed and one represents upload speed. The reason that these numbers are important is that they make up the requirements for grant eligibility. So at the bottom of the screen, you see here, these are the FCC definitions for what they defined as broadband. In other words, if a company was able to offer these speeds in these timeframes, then they would be eligible for grant funding. This is relevant because we are on the verge of an unprecedented amount of investment that will be poured into broadband infrastructure in the coming years as part of the Infrastructure Act passed by Congress. There are nationwide around $45 billion that are allocated for broadband improvements, with the state of Oregon getting a sizable chunk of that. And so the goal of this project was to help position Yamhill County to be able to take advantage of those programs when the state broadband office is ready to roll them out. This is a list of the various broadband providers who operate within Yamhill County, as well as the technology medium that they use to deliver service. In broadband, fiber optic networks are generally considered the state of the art. They transmit data using light signals. The cables themselves are sort of neutral, so they're very future-proof. The electronics that send the light signals through the cables on either end can be upgraded, and so it's considered the gold standard going forward. The reason I mention all that is to say that, just looking at this chart, it's fairly easy to see that the fiber providers are somewhat limited. Most of the service providers in Yamhill County are delivering their product using either some method of wireless delivery or legacy coaxial cable or phone lines. So this is a map that, broadly speaking, shows broadband service availability in Yamhill County. The color scheme that you see is sort of a heat map, wherein the darker red, or the darker the shade of red, the poorer the access quality to broadband. And this is somewhat borne out, as you can see, via the population centers being in orange. That tends to be where it's easiest for private sector companies to make a business case to build. That's where the density of their customers is greatest. And so as part of this project, we chose to focus our attentions on the western part of the county, and specifically the West Valley region here. And that's primarily because we have a couple of smaller population centers, but this is looking at access availability. This is the part of the county where we felt like we could make the most impact. The sort of overall goal of the project was to create a program to just redistribute funds that the county received via the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and set those funds aside to create a regranting program to the private sector to subsidize build outs in areas that they had previously been unable to make a business case to go to. Next, in order to confirm that we were kind of looking at the right area, we performed a several month-long survey and outreach process, wherein we attempted to reach residents, business owners, and various stakeholder organizations in the county, and had them run through a survey to assess their experience of broadband. We kind of operate off of maps that the FCC uses, and the data in those FCC maps is essentially provided by the internet service providers themselves. And as a result of that, there are often inconsistencies between the FCC data and the reality on the ground. And these types of surveys are a way to attempt to bridge that gap, even though we have kind of going into a project like this, sort of a pretty good baseline understanding of what the service availability is based on what the FCC knows. Next, we performed an engineering effort to just look at, what it would cost if we were to build fiber to the home throughout the West Valley region. This is not necessarily a technologically or economically feasible approach, particularly for the demand points of residences who are in the very rural areas, wherein a long fiber lateral would have to be constructed in order to deliver service. It is generally, as a rule of thumb, more or less impossible for the private sector to make a business case to service demand points like that using a technology like fiber. But this is a valuable sort of tool to give us a ballpark sense of what the total cost to build broadband infrastructure in this part of the county would be. Next, we divided that West Valley region into polygons that, these polygons are sort of based on, from a technological standpoint, if we were to service a given number of customers using a fiber cabinet that can service a certain number of households. So the size of the polygons represent, each of these polygons has roughly the same number of demand points within them. Obviously, I recognize that the numbers or the legend and the labels on the map might be difficult to see. So I have tabulated all that information into a much easier to understand. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I personally love a spreadsheet. So this is so each of those 15 polygons in the previous slide is represented by one of the rows on this chart. This column here, broadband serviceable locations, this is the term that the FCC uses to denote a location which needs broadband. That can be a residence or a business or a community anchor institution such as a library or sheriff's station. So here you can see we've roughly grouped these into so under 400 demand points per polygon. That's done intentionally to allow for the possibility of future growth. And then in this next column, you see the estimated cost per passing. So what that essentially is we take our total cost to build. So we use an algorithmically driven network design tool that tells us footages for the various sizes of fiber cable that would be needed, the number of handholds, vaults, cabinets, and network electronics. And we sort of aggregate all of that into the total cost to build, or the estimated cost to build for that polygon. And then we divide that by the number of serviceable locations to get the average cost per passing. This figure is important because private broadband service providers will typically have a threshold that they want to see before an investment into a given area makes sense for them to do. That threshold, generally speaking, is around $1,200 per passing. So just right off of the bat, it's relatively easy to see that some of these polygons, particularly the ones in the more densely populated residential areas, the towns in the West Valley, are pretty close to that $1,200 threshold. And I say $1,200, that's sort of a ballpark. You know, if you were to ask executives from Comcast or Lumen, you know, they would probably both give you a different figure. 1,200 is just sort of a, you know, rough estimate of what they like to see. Obviously, the lower, the better. But it's very easy to see some of these polygons, area 3, 1, and 2, for example, where the cost to build is well over $10,000 per passing. And so, you know, when you look at these numbers, it's somewhat easy to understand from a business standpoint why some of these areas have not gotten the investment in improved services. And it helps really clearly make the case for why a regranting program could very effectively help the private sector to address this issue. This will greatly inform the regranting effort that we will be rolling out next. So as part of all of this information that we have been collecting, we are in the process of putting together a roadmap for Yamhill County that will provide county staff and leadership with a data-driven approach to assist in decision-making going forward. I mentioned the roughly $45 billion in federal grant funding that's being made available nationwide, a sizable chunk of that going to Oregon. And this project, you know, we've got the somewhat limited amount of funds that the county has set aside from the ARPA dollars. And so this is the strategic roadmap that we're working on will sort of allow Yamhill County to replicate the success, presumed success of this upcoming regranting program to take advantage of the BEAD funds, and that's a Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Fund, which those monies will be coming through via the State Broadband Office over the course of the next couple of years. So we will be taking all of the information that we collected as part of the study, the roadmap, the survey data, and the engineering data that we produced to create a scoring matrix that is as fair as possible, so that when applicants apply for the money to build in those underserved polygons, that the county staff is able to evaluate those applications in a fair and balanced manner. Having said that, we also recognize that there is a subjective component to selecting a broadband provider. Very often, a broadband provider will have been part of a community for a long time, and community leadership will have feelings one way or the other about that company. And so while we are orienting the program to be as data-driven and fair as possible when it comes to the award process, we will also include the ability for county decision makers to select one applicant over another based on the soft impression of that company's reputation within the county. As part of this regranting program, HR Green is bringing in a sub-consultant who has worked closely with the NTIA in producing federal grant programs in the past. And so this regranting program will be designed in accordance with those NTIA guidelines, and will be set up, operated, and administered using sort of that gold standard. And I think most importantly, this approach really serves to keep the county out of the broadband business. It allows the county to play a facilitative role and foster relationships with the private sector. So that concludes my presentation. And I have allocated some time for questions if the commission has any.
Thank you, Ben. So you said next steps, you're going to try and kind of boil down where our ARPA money would be best allocated. Is that what I gather?
Yes, that's correct. So, I'll go back to this table. So we'll be producing what's called a NOFO, a Notice of Funding Opportunity, which will then go out to the private sector. That'll have maps and a breakdown of the areas that we want them to focus on. We will include the specific polygon boundaries so that as much as possible, the county is able to make an apples to apples comparison with the applicants. And the idea being, we've fielded questions such as, will the county require a match, for example? And the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that what that match actually looks like is going to vary from area to area. So, for example, we can reasonably expect that area 7 here, where the cost per passing is around $1,700, that the level of subsidy that a private entity would need in order to justify that investment would be substantially lower than the subsidy required to build, say, an area 3. And so what we will be able to accomplish is, again, using a scoring matrix that weighs how much investment or subsidy the private company is seeking, how many of these areas they believe they can build service in, and so on, so that the county is able to select the applicant who has provided the best plan for servicing the most number of people at the lowest level of subsidy amount.
Great, thank you.
So basically, what we're looking at today, because I know this is a lot of information being presented.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that went into this. Just a reminder that we had just over $1 million of our local ARPA allocation that was a direct allocation to the county available to support this project. But we also received from the state of Oregon's ARPA allocation of $2.3 million, thanks to Senator Boquist, who identified rural broadband as an area. So we have just over $3 million available to help support some projects. And like we had discussed early on, and the reason we've been going through this effort is $3 million isn't going to solve the broadband. However, this work will help make informed decisions on how best to direct that $3 million and where we would get, essentially the best bang for the buck, for that investment to address those needs and still comply with all the requirements under ARPA as far as compliance with upload, download speeds and projects. And so as far as the next step, like Ben was talking about, is we would like to go into an RFP or a solicitation process that would go out to local ISPs and start soliciting projects. And then being with some framework to help point the direction that based on the data, this is the direction, where we're looking to see projects occur, where we're looking to make those investments, and then help make an informed decision on actual awards once we start actually receiving proposals. You may recall before we even did this effort, we did an RFI, a request for information. I apologize for all the acronyms, but we reached out to ISPs several years ago and it was kind of all over the county, a lot of projects and well in excess of even what we had in our direct allocation, our total ARPA allocation as far as the cost. And so we've been doing this work and trying to focus this down, and the next step is just looking where the board's at. We'd like to do a solicitation to actually identify some specific projects that then we can bring back before the board and then have that discussion about where to award.
If I may interject to add one other thing, I think it's worth mentioning that the contract that HR Green is working under includes the creation of the NOFO and the administration of the regranting program. So we are under contract to perform those services for the county, and have sort of already begun the process of doing so. We've already engaged our subconsultant. This presentation is intended as a way of communicating kind of where county staff is at with this project and what to expect from it in the coming months. But I guess I say that to say that, we're already being paid to walk through the process that was just described. So you won't need to allocate any additional funds for that.
It's been a while since we've talked about this, so it seems like this is going in the direction that I recall the board having concern over, which is we don't have a lot of money, so what's the biggest bang for our buck here? But if I'm understanding correctly, did you say they're polygons, but the targeted areas, is that all in the West Valley?
Yes, that's correct.
So we've kind of chosen to lock in there.
Yes, and that in part is due to the limited number of funds that are available. So, for example, if we had looked, more countywide, I believe it was just mentioned that like the consulting services that HR Green and our subcontractors have been performing for Yamhill County are included as part of the costs in the total amount of ARPA funds that were set aside to pay for broadband improvements. So we wanted to be sort of cost conscious about not overspending on, nice to have engineering when that might dilute the available monies too much to have a meaningful impact. If I go back to my chart here, am I still sharing my screen? Yes, I am. Okay. So, going back to this chart, the county has 3 million total in ARPA funds to put towards a regranting effort. I mean, just looking at a list of the cost to build these areas, and we're not talking about, huge chunks of the county's population. $5 million to build to just under 400 people. If we were to attempt to spread that 3 million out countywide, it would just be too diluted. And our concern was that, we wanted to put together a regranting program that would be genuinely enticing to the private sector and genuinely allow them to make the economics of a network deployment work for them.
Okay, and so the goal is to have the private sector come in with a match or to a certain degree. And
correct. Yes. And then the idea being, and I have been cautioned against using phrases like pilot project or, anything of that, or proof of concept. But, in a way that is sort of what we're doing here in creating a regranting program with the ARPA funds. So far it seems to be, but as part of this project, we had conversations with all of or a number of the service providers in the county, and pretty much across the board, they're very interested in the concept. And so, assuming that we can successfully utilize this approach to improve service access in the West Valley, we can then replicate the process for the rest of the county with the BEAD dollars that you guys will be getting access to at some point in the future. And again, this is part of the roadmap is, we're kind of creating an example that you'll be able to look back on and replicate in the future.
great. Well, I have to say that when we receive feedback about complaints about access, it's typically coming from the West Valley. So I like that this is focused there. Any questions?
Questions? Ben, thank you for the information. It was understandable. So a couple of questions. Do you have any more information on what those stakeholder organizations were? Because it seemed like it was a relatively small number of respondents to a survey. So what organizations were used to get this survey out?
Great question. So you are not wrong. The number of survey responses that we got was frankly a little bit disappointing. I think there's a few factors that go into that are worth shedding some light on. Number one, this was an online survey, and it was pretty long. It took about between 20 and 30 minutes to complete. So if you were a person whose broadband access was limited or inconsistent and spotty, your ability to actually participate in the survey was limited as a result of that. When it comes to specific stakeholder organizations, I don't have a list in front of me. However, I do have a substantial amount of documentation that was compiled throughout the process that I'd be happy to make available to the commission and staff. I believe we've got, I don't know exactly what the details are that went into the packet that you guys should have received as part of this project. And I'm not certain whether or not details on the stakeholder organizations are included in that. However, all of that information will comprise a chapter in the strategic or broadband roadmap document that we will be providing to you.
Thank you. I have one more question. Sort of the presupposition is that there's going to be broadband infrastructure. When I'm looking at when you look at terrain and you look at feasibility, it seems that a satellite application would be less expensive, would be more feasible in some of the areas of the county where there can never be broadband. So is that
Certainly.
part of the equation here, and can it ever be part of the equation, or are we limited to broadband?
That's an excellent question. So as part of the report that we'll be delivering to you, we include a technical discussion that gets into, the technical reasons or justifications for utilizing one approach over another. It is generally the case that in very sparsely populated rural areas that satellite-based internet service can be, an effective way of closing the digital divide gap. Unfortunately, it's a technology that has some significant limitations when compared to something like fiber. And there are also costs associated issues with satellite access. Typically, and again, these are details that we include in the report that you'll be able to review at your convenience. But I'll do my best to not make this overly technical. But there's technical limitations to download and upload speeds just based on the latency delay between sending and receiving the signal between the satellite and the end user. There are also let's see, how can I describe this in a easy to understand way? So that there's each sort of satellite covered area will have a limited number of, or a limited amount of bandwidth that they can offer to customers within that area. And so what that means is the more customers that you have connected to that satellite, the slower the speeds are for everybody. And so in an area where there's very limited numbers of people, it can be effective. It often will struggle to meet those FCC benchmark download and upload speeds. However, all of that being said, I don't want to give the impression that it's fiber or nothing. That is certainly not the case. The the stopgap technology that is most likely to be applicable in the rural parts of Yamhill County is called fixed wireless, which is capable of performance similar to a fiber network. And we know for a fact that there are currently fixed wireless providers offering service in parts of the West Valley who could potentially upgrade their infrastructure by replacing the radios on the towers that send the fixed wireless signals to improve service. So legacy fixed wireless technologies are relatively slow, but the newer radios are much faster. However, they're also more expensive. And so, you know, we run back into that cost per passing calculation that internet service providers do. And it very well may be the case that we have responses to the NOFO from fixed wireless providers who are capable of meeting the speed requirements to be grant eligible or to meet those ARPA requirements without having to use fiber to do so. And it is very likely that there will be at least one respondent who's able to make a solid case for an approach like that.
And so you would also make it, in other words, you would also consider satellite respondents to your NOFO.
As long as they're able to demonstrate that they have the ability to meet the speed requirements.
Thank you.
Which is required by the ARPA agreement, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, that's federally mandated. We can't be flexible on that.
Any questions? Kit?
Yeah, mine was kind of down the road of Commissioner Sterrett's comments, just rough math. If you add up all the 15 different scenarios and zones, you're roughly 5,200 households. And if you take that 3 million, that's 576 per household. And Starlink right now at a minimum 600 to install. So if the satellite was fast enough, that to me seems the most logical way to address all of them. And that doesn't even include a company match. If the company's looking at it at a $1,200 per pass minimum for them to actually do it themselves without us even giving input, that's just flat out, here's the install money for that. If wireless works. So yeah, I definitely would want to see an emphasis and a lot of data on whether satellite can work in these rural areas.
Yeah, so we will provide, like I said, we've got some fairly detailed technical information in the packet that gets into. There are also more than one satellite broadband delivery method. There's a low Earth orbit and near Earth orbit. There are multiple, Starlink is sort of the most commonly, that's probably the only one that's like a household name, but there are other providers as well. And yeah, we will certainly be sending the NOFO to all of those companies. And again, if they're able to make a case that they can meet those speeds and they can do that with less subsidy than any of the other companies, then they're a clear winner.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions?
No. Thank you, Justin, for your work on
Thank you,
this.
Justin and Ben. Appreciate it.
And Ben.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again very much for your time. Any follow-up questions that you might have after this meeting can probably be passed through to me by Justin. So please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only other really short, quick kind of update related to the funding. So we were up against some internal deadlines with the state. They applied some. Thank you, Carrie, yesterday applied because we had a short timeline, and I'm kind of concerned about going through the process because it's taken some time, because that was some of the challenges you hit on it briefly about the survey responses and the length of time that we had things open and trying to do outreach. it was creating some delays to the project. And so that's why some decisions originally, we had a deadline of June 30th of next year to expend the funds. We did reach out and apply for an extension for that, just to ensure that when we go through the NOFO and that we have sufficient time to make sure that we can expend the funds. You know, because we're all up against, the state's up against the same timeline considerations that we are under ARPA as far as obligation and when the funds are spent. But every jurisdiction may have a slightly different interpretation on what spent means. Does that mean awarding a grant, or does that mean completely spent on the project? And so in an abundance of caution, we did do an outreach, and thank you again to Senator Boquist, who he had to sign off on our request, and he did yesterday, and supported our request for an extension. So,
And we extended it till when?
December 31st, 2024 for obligation.
correct, for obligation.
So just quickly to speak to that in terms of timeline, the NOFO will be ready and circulated by the end of Q1 of next year. We'll be kind of diving seriously into it in the month of January. Our sub-consultant is right now engaged on another project, but we should have the program drafted up by the end of January and ready to hit the streets by March or so. So we hope to have awardees well before that deadline hits.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Right, that was it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are moving on to item G, which is our consent agenda. Looks like several contracts on consent. I just have a comment that I'm glad to see that work was done on our juvenile detention bed rental rates to bring those more in line with what it's actually costing us, because if you look at the difference, it's pretty significant. So, any questions on the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor of, I will move approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of approval of reinstatement and amendment number 1 to intergovernmental agreement number 15695 between Yamhill County Community Justice Juvenile Division and the Oregon Department of Education Youth Development Division, awarding grant funding in the amount of $133,200 to support local Yamhill County prevention programs retroactive to July 1st, 2023 through June 30th of 2025. I will move approval. Is there further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Right, motion passes. Thank you. I2 is consideration of approval of the notice of award issued by the Oregon Health Authority for infrastructure support for reproductive health services in the amount of $31,450 effective through March 30th of 2024.
Chair, this is basically to support the renovation of the Kirby Street location, and it is related to an award that was previously approved under a previous board order. So I would move approval.
Okay. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. I3, consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to an agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and Chemeketa Community College, Board Order 23-346, to provide HHS-wide training, extending the agreement through June 30th of 2024.
And this is just extended out, but basically it's been approved. So I'd move approval.
Right. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes. I4 is consideration of approval of a letter of opposition to the City of McMinnville's proposal to levy any or all of the $1.50 portion of city property tax levy previously allocated for fire services. And Commissioners, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the letter draft. It was added to the packet yesterday. But it is a letter from the Board of Commissioners to Mayor Drabkin and council members. And essentially is calling for a public vote of approval and encouraging them to make that decision for any part of the old fire district or fire service levy that the city was administering. Typically, we don't tend to get involved in city issues, although we do have history of doing so because we have shared constituents. I recall many times testifying in Newburgh against their SDC fees in favor of affordable housing, and the city of Lafayette recently. We all attended that meeting to make sure that our constituents were protected from astronomical water bills. So we do have a history of intervening, I suppose, on behalf of our shared constituents. And when we were going through the process, when the city approached us and we were going through the process of deciding whether or not we wanted to be a partner with the city and the fire department to place these ballot measures on, we decided to be a good partner and allow that to happen, because ultimately, at the end of the day, a public vote is the purest form of buy-in and endorsement. And so even though we had concerns over how it was going to work and then the process itself was a little messy, at the end of the day, we hung our hat on the fact that the taxpayers and the voters had a direct say in that decision. What we also expressed concern about during that conversation was the behavior of the city and what their commitment was to the taxpayers in the city when it came to what they were going to do with the old portion of their levy that was funding fire service, which was $1.50. And at the time, we expressed concern that at the very least, they should ask the taxpayers for permission before they made that decision. They would get buy-in. The city then, over the course of the past several months, has engaged in what they called a dollars and cents effort survey. It was a very complicated survey online, not a lot of participation whatsoever. And if you were a taxpayer in the city of McMinnville that disagreed with the city spending any of the money, it was very difficult to record that response. And anybody who knows about outreach, public outreach, the older segments of our population do not necessarily go online to complete surveys and file responses that way. And so because the survey was so flawed in a sense, the News Register came out with their own survey and sort of did a broad reaching survey of what do taxpayers think about this. I don't necessarily agree with that one either, because they were asking people that don't live in the city of McMinnville what they thought, and you're not paying those taxes. So I don't necessarily agree with how they did that. But the crux of it is that the survey responses, the majority of people said, don't levy the tax. And the city held a special budget committee meeting on Tuesday night where they discussed what they were going to do. And this is 15 or 16 people sitting around a table discussing how they were going to bring this $1.50 or a portion of it back online. And I was absolutely stunned. I don't know if you watched the meeting. I was absolutely stunned to see and hear comments specifically from the mayor of McMinnville saying that the people who voted to support the fire department and the creation and the formation of a new fire district did also cast a de facto vote in favor of any part of that $1.50 coming back online. That is absolutely false. And I feel that this board was misled. I feel that the city is being dishonest. I went back and looked through the voter pamphlet statement from the May election, the special election. Not once did any member of the city of McMinnville, the city council, ever say that if you vote for the formation of the fire district, that you are also voting to raise your city taxes. Not once. The only person who said that and warned about that was former Commissioner Dennis Gex in his statement that he provided. He warned people that the city was not, there was no sideboards on the city being able to bring back any part of this $1.50. But that is not the intent of, it was not the intent of this board. When we voted to place these measures on the ballot and we supported public engagement and involvement, we did not do so with any expectation that the city of McMinnville would then come back later and reapply any part of that $1.50 without asking the taxpayers first. That was not the position of this board. It is not the position of this board. And frankly, I feel like we were lied to, not by the fire department, but by the city council. And so I would like us to weigh in directly and formally against the city's decision. They voted on Tuesday night to recommend to staff that they prepare a budget that brings back 50 cents of that $1.50. And in that discussion, they were very clear that they fully intend to bring back all of the rest of it, if not a significant portion of it, the following year. What was not discussed on Tuesday night was any indication or willingness to go in front of the voters, even in an advisory vote, and ask the city of McMinnville taxpayers whether or not they're okay with this, whether or not they agree that any portion of that old fire service levy should then be reapplied to some other city service. And I just was absolutely stunned by the mayor's comment that one of the goals, she literally said, one of the goals of the fire district formation vote was to liberate the city taxes to then be applied elsewhere in their budget. Stunning, stunning comment. And so I'm asking you as my colleagues, people who have participated in this process, people who support the fire district and supported the formation of it because they wanted to prioritize public safety. I think we need to take a stand against the city council's behavior. And I think that at the end of the day, they should be willing to place this in front of the taxpayers, even in an advisory vote, and ask permission and make their case. If you want that money and you have pressing needs and they're valid and the taxpaying public agrees with you, it'll pass. But at the very least, they need to do that. I don't agree with the behavior that I'm witnessing. I did reach out to the McMinnville Fire Board, the new fire board that governs the new district, and asked them, do you agree with this? Do you agree with this behavior? Do you agree that the people who voted to support your new district also voted to raise their own city taxes by $2 per thousand? That's essentially what is happening. City taxpayers will have their taxes go up by $2 per thousand, not 50 cents, $2 per thousand. And I haven't received a response. I didn't see a response. Yeah, I think there's times when it's not appropriate for the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners to get involved. And then there's times that are, and this is a time when I think we need to encourage better behavior.
Chair, a couple of comments. I met with former Commissioner Gex yesterday, and he made a comment, "My commissioners let me down." And that's the first time I ever heard him in any way concerned about the votes that we have made collectively. But I think what he was referring to is what was the sort of the collateral damage of this particular board's action of actually endorsing putting this on the ballot. So it became our responsibility. But I think at the end of the day, this really does mirror what happened in Newburgh at the formation of the TVFNR when that whole annexation went on, because a prior city council was attempting to do the very same thing. And a citizen noticed it and brought it to the attention of the city council, a completely different city council. But it was one of those situations that people would not have understood until it was just too late. So I think it is appropriate, since we were involved in this, to weigh in. And I would completely concur with the sentiment in that letter that, I've never seen a government agency that is willing to turn over taxpayer dollars once they have the opportunity to retain those dollars. So I think this needs to be, give the voters need to get a chance to weigh in.
Thank you. Commissioner, any thoughts?
I agree. The ultimate fail-safe is to put it to the voters, and that's what needs to happen.
Okay, so I will move approval of the letter in item I4. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. We'll get that drafted and signed, and then I will likely email it to each city councilor, but also to the city recorder for public testimony for the next meeting. Okay, I believe that's all on the old other business agenda. So before we get into our public hearing, you mind taking a 5-minute break? Okay, we'll do that. We'll be back soon. Welcome back, everyone. We are picking up at item J. Sorry, public hearings. J1 is docket P-03-23, a request to partition an approximately 31.52 acre property into parcels of approximately 1.66 and 29.2 acres. This partition application is possible due to a Measure 49 final order and home site authorization, E131580, approved by the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. The applicant is Cindy and Larry Christensen. The appellant is Jordan and Shawnee May. Tax lot number 6304-00307. So I will go ahead and open the hearing. Are there any abstentions by members of the board?
I would just like to declare a not potential conflict of interest. I'm casually acquainted with one of the appellants.
I am also casually acquainted with both the applicant and the appellant.
Not acquainted, but know of them.
That works.
Okay.
It's hard not to know them, so. Okay, are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the board to hear the matter before it? Does any board member need to announce and state on the record the substance of any ex parte contact or site visits?
Well, no site visits and no ex parte, but I was in the planning commission meeting.
Yeah.
When it came before them.
You weren't on the
Nope.
planning. It was this year.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I was in the audience as a commissioner.
Okay, so now we will have we'll read the statements required by law.
Oregon law requires that persons who attend a land use hearing be advised of certain rights and duties before the hearing begins. First, with regard to standards for approval, state law, ORS 197.797 requires that we list the applicable substantive criteria that must be met in order for the county to approve the application. The standards will be listed by the county planner in a moment as part of the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the standards for approval. Second, the raise it or waive it rule under Oregon law. Any issue that might be raised in an appeal of the county's decision in this matter must be raised before the record of the hearing is closed. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the board based on that issue. Third, and this is directed to the applicant, under ORS 197.796, failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval, again with sufficient specificity to allow the county to respond to the issue, precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
Thank you, Director Friday. The applicable approval criteria and standards are Measure 49, the final order Echo 131580, and the M Hill County Land Division Ordinance. The staff report is as follows. The applicant is requesting approval of a partition application to create a new parcel of approximately 1.66 acres from an existing 31.52 acre parcel. The current applicants, Rich and Nicole Moore, purchased the subject parcel from the initial applicant, Cindy Christensen, on October 24th and wish to proceed with the partition as approved by the Planning Commission on October 5th. The Planning Commission's approval was appealed on October 23rd by neighbors Jordan and Shawnee May. The subject parcel itself is located in the exclusive farm use district to the EF 80 zone, which normally has an 80 acre minimum for newly created parcels. The proposed partition request is possible due to a Measure 49 final order and home site authorization, which was approved by the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. The subject parcel is predominantly used agriculturally in the form of an approximately 22 acre hazelnut orchard, and the parcel is receiving farm tax deferral. The surrounding parcels are all located in the exclusive farm use zone. There are a number of farm activities evident in the surrounding area, including grass seed and hay production, nut tree orchards, and nursery stock. There are several small lots in the surrounding area, ranging in size from 0.7 to 3 acres in size, with single-family dwellings that are predominantly dedicated to rural residential use. The applicant initially proposed creating the Measure 49 lot in the northwestern area of the subject parcel. However, a revised site plan was submitted, which modified the location of the proposed parcel to be partitioned from the southernmost region of the parent property. This revised location would create the new 1.66 acre parcel directly north of the lot that was partitioned by the previous owner in 2020 through docket P-07-20. This revised location appears to satisfy the clustering standard provided in section 4, item 11 of the Measure 49 final order. The proposed new parcel would have direct access to Southeast Wallace Road. Water to the lot would be provided by a well, and the proposed home site would be served by the development of a new septic system. On October 5th, the Planning Commission unanimously approved the partition request, with this approval being appealed on October 23rd. And that concludes the staff report.
Lance, can I just verify that when this property changed hands, all of the rights and the abilities to do what was going to be done transferred to the Moores? Nothing's
Yes.
changed. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct, Chair Bershauer. When Measure 49 final orders are issued, there's a 10-year clock that starts counting down if the party that received the Measure 49 approval sells that property and passes it on. So any subsequent owner can execute the Measure 49 final
Okay.
order.
Okay, so that brings us to the applicant's case. I see Cindy, I don't know if it's Cindy Christensen or. Cindy's on, and then the Moores are also here.
Yeah, Cindy wants to speak. She's the previous owner.
Okay, well, why don't we start with you? You're Richard?
My name's
Okay.
Richard Moore.
Please come on up. And if you could just state your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Name is Richard Moore, 4600 Perrydale Road, Dallas, Oregon.
Welcome.
Good to be here. I assume that everything that has been in the record, you're all aware of.
Mhm.
I don't really have a lot to add to that. It's pretty lengthy, in my view. About ran my printer out of ink. I would just say this, I just want to reiterate that it is our desire, we bought the property knowing that there was a dispute regarding this, and hoping that would be resolved by the time we closed, but it was not. Having purchased the property, we are aware and agreeable to all of the conditions set forth by the staff report and approved by the Planning Commission. I would also add to that there is a lot of rhetoric in this stack of documents that refers to the previous owner and their intents, or what they may or may not have done that may or may not have been lawful or unlawful. I would just respectfully ask the commission to consider all of that moot. The previous owner has no control over the property. We bought it. I go out there, I walk in that building. There's an ag building there with a unpermitted space. The county has arrested that, and we can't use it until we meet their criteria. We're aware of that. We're agreeable to that. None of that should cloud the issue today, which is simply a partition request. But it's easy for it to look at, the potential intent of what the owner wanted to do or what they actually did do, and whether or not that was legal or illegal. I don't want that to cloud your decision. I just would appreciate if what you do is based simply on the issue at hand, which is a partition of the property. I agree with the written argument in September 28th that's in the record by the Christensen's attorney, which states that Yamhill County is fully capable of dealing with any and all considerations regarding a building, setbacks, all of those issues that may arise, whether it's site evaluation for a septic or considering a property buildable or non-buildable, all of those will have to come before the building department and be addressed that way. And you have a legal remedy to deal with that within your own department. So we just simply ask that this partition be judged on its own merits. And we feel that and agree with the staff report that it is according to law. And I'll reserve the right to a rebuttal if necessary.
If I can clarify really quick. So in my review of the packet, the bathroom facilities were removed and then the pipe was cut or capped underground.
So the septic line was cut and capped.
Okay.
The toilet was removed, but none of that was done with a permit with Yamhill County, if I understand it right. I mean, it's been done, it can't be used.
Okay.
But there's some legal hoops that would have to be gone through to ensure the decommissioning.
And we have spoken with them about it.
Yeah, we're-
Okay. Okay. And I want to make sure I'm clear. There was a lot of discussion about the number 7 of the planning commission's recommendations or requirements. And that is something that you're accepting and are fine with.
We feel like to move forward, we need to have legal authority to do so by the county. And then yes, follow all of the necessary steps as outlined here. We agree to that.
Okay. Okay, any questions for Mr. Moore?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other testimony in support of the application? Okay, and now we have the appellant's case. It looks like we have Attorney Joe Strunk. Welcome.
Chairwoman, thank you for the floor. Commissioners, thank you for your time. Is it okay if I stand? Can you hear me okay if I stand?
Yeah.
Okay. I was a former English teacher. I can't stand to sit and talk. My name is Joseph Strunk. I'm an attorney here in McMinnville. Are you picking me up okay on the mic? Okay, I'll try to stand closer. My office address is 408 South Baker, McMinnville, Oregon. I represent the appellants in this matter, Jordan and Shawnee May. They regrettably cannot be here today, but asked me to appear on their behalf. My issue is pretty simple. I'll try to be quick. I know y'all been here a while. A legal error was committed in approving this partition. I'd like to explain why. Instead of making y'all dig through the packet, I made a couple of copies of the Measure 49 order and the site map. Can I hand those out quickly? Any objection to that?
Yeah, we just need some copies, I think. over
Okay,
here.
yeah, I'm gonna hand copies to everybody. Sure. I just thought this would be quicker than trying to dig through your packet of materials. Map.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right. I think it'd be helpful to take a step back and remember what we're doing here. It was mentioned in the staff report that the request here is to partition a parcel that's comprised of 31.52 acres and is located in an EF 80 zone. The request is to partition 1.66 acres off of that.
Mhm.
Clearly, that's not permitted by the applicable zoning. In an EF 80 zone, you've got to have at least 80 acres extra to carve off, right? So we're carving 1.6 acres off of a 31 acre parcel here in an EF 80 zone. That's a big deal. How can they do that? The planner already told us it's permitted by this Measure 49 order that I just gave you a copy of. This order requires the county, requires the planning commission to consider certain conditions before it approves a partition. And I'd like to point that out to you right now. If you can flip over the Measure 49 order that I just gave you, flip over a couple pages to page 5, please. You'll see I've highlighted that. Oh, sorry. Yep. My apologies. So you'll see the part I highlighted there. So EF80 zone, 31 acres. No way we can do this partition except for this. And you'll see the part I highlighted. The claimant is authorized for 2 additional lots or parcels and 2 additional dwellings on the property on which the claimant is eligible for Measure 49 relief, subject to the following terms. And there's a list of terms there, 13 of them to be exact. And if you flip over to number 11, I've also highlighted that. One of the conditions of this order requires that new home sites be clustered so as to maximize suitability of the remnant lot or parcel for farm or forest use. Now, when we raised this before the Planning Commission, the discussion before the Planning Commission was that condition doesn't apply to this partition. They said that only applies to the siting of a dwelling, which comes down the road later on. I think that's a misreading of the Measure 49 order. Let's go back to that first part I highlighted there. Read that carefully. It says the claimant is authorized for 2 additional lots or parcels. In other words, the claimant can make a partition. The zoning doesn't allow it, but we're going to let the claimant partition this property, but only if you follow these conditions. Planning Commission didn't consider clustering. We brought it up. We said this application doesn't comply with the clustering requirement. The Planning Commission disregarded that. They said it's not relevant. They said it will come up later when we issue a building permit down the road. That's not what this order says. This order says if you want to partition the property, you have to consider clustering too. Not just when you're siting a dwelling. When you want to partition it, that's also a factor. The reason we raised this initially, if you look at the map that I provided you, the planner mentioned to you that the original proposal was to put the parcel on the north end of this property. This order allowed for 3 parcels and 3 dwellings. One parcel, it was referenced in the application, was already carved off a few years back on the southern end of the property. So when my client saw this application and that the proposal was to put the next parcel on the far northern end of the property, you'll see it on the map where it says existing well, existing shed, I believe. They wanted to put the other parcel up there, which is the opposite of clustering. That's as far away from the other parcel as you can get. So when we raised this concern, the application was amended to move the parcel to the south, right? We also raised a concern about an illegal dwelling that was constructed on the north end of the parcel. There was some discussion of that a second ago. There was a house built there without approval, septic, everything. I believe people were living in it. And the property was marketed for sale as a dwelling. So that dwelling location clearly, from looking at the map, would not satisfy that clustering requirement. Let me back up a little bit. Measure 49 replaced Measure 37. Measure 37 granted people development rights. Measure 49 did away with that. People who had Measure 37 claims could apply for Measure 49 relief. They all submit an application to DLCD. DLCD processed these applications. Each was unique and issued an order. Each order was unique. Those orders were appealable. I appealed a couple of them back then, and I recall winning at least one of them. So when DLCD issued these orders, if you disagreed with the language of it, you could appeal it. You could take it to circuit court and sometimes get them changed. That wasn't done here. So this land, while it is benefited by this Measure 49 order, I apologize. It's clear from these conditions that clustering has to be considered before you allow a partition of the land. Planning Commission didn't do that. Planning Commission said it's not relevant. A couple of commissioners actually said they didn't think clustering was required here. Let me check my notes really quick. This is problematic for a few reasons. One, the partition is not allowed unless you consider all the conditions. That's the first problem. Second problem here is that because it's required to consider clustering, this record does not support a partition under this Measure 49 order because clustering was not considered and because there's considerable and substantial evidence in the record that clustering was not complied with and was not going to be complied with. The only dwelling location of record here is on the far north end of the parcel that's not even close to being clustered. So this record cannot support a partition because it's not consistent with the Measure 49 order, those clear terms. Third and finally, the land division ordinance that was referenced in the approval and in the application, it requires consideration of septic and water supply for potential dwellings. And discussion during the Planning Commission hearing was, well, we're getting ahead of the game here. We haven't sited a dwelling yet. It's unclear where this dwelling's going to go. I would argue you can't fulfill the terms of the land division ordinance without having some semblance or some rough idea of where that dwelling's going to be. You can't say, well, we're going to consider it down the road. The land division ordinance, which is applicable to this application, requires consideration of septic and water supply. And you can't do that if you're saying, well, we don't know where the dwelling's going to be. Can't do it. Okay, let me make sure I've said all the things I need to say. I think it's also worth noting and relevant to this consideration that we did raise this issue and we're told by the applicant that they would not agree to cluster that home. We simply asked for a simple condition that said, if you agree to comply with that condition and cluster that home as you're required, we won't object. And they refused. It seemed like an easy way to resolve our concerns. But it's even more concerning considering all the evidence of an illegal dwelling here and how that illegal dwelling does not comply with the clustering requirement. I just don't think the Planning Commission can approve this application based upon this record. It's very problematic. And we request that you commissioners today send this back to the Planning Commission with instructions to consider that clustering requirement as they're required and issue a new decision. I think it's also worth noting, just in closing, that I don't believe my clients are going to get, if this gets approved and we proceed down the path of building a home pursuant to the Measure 49 order, I don't believe my clients get notice of that building permit. When a building permit's issued on a new dwelling, I don't think my clients are going to get notice of that. And that's concerning to them because they feel like this clustering requirement's not being fulfilled. They're farmers too. They live there. This is going to have an impact on them. They'd like to have an opportunity to speak on this and express their concerns on this clustering requirement. And if we proceed and say this is going to be dealt with at the building permit level, that's concerning to them. Happy to answer questions if you have any.
I do.
Okay.
So clustering, actually, let me take a step back.
Mhm.
This particular property has already been partitioned. There is one lot,
The Measure 49 order allowed
For-
two more parcels.
total of three.
Total of three.
Yes,
One of them was done a few years ago.
right.
We're talking about the second and resultant third parcel
Right.
here.
So per the Measure 49 allowance, they can partition another parcel, which is, it sounds like they sort of capitulated to clustering it alongside the first one on the southern end.
The parcel,
Yes.
correct, the parcel, correct.
Which then leaves which I'm assuming this is what it means, the remnant lot is the rest of it. Okay.
Mhm.
Has there ever been a home on the remnant lot? No, okay.
Mm, There is one now, an illegal home.
So
The only evidence of a dwelling on this parcel is illegal and it does not satisfy the clustering requirement.
I understand that, but we don't recognize that as a dwelling. If it's illegal, it was put there without our permission, we don't recognize it as a dwelling.
Okay.
If you own ag land in Yamhill County, you have the right to build an ag structure
Correct.
without asking for approval.
Correct.
So if it's an ag building, it can be there. As long as it satisfies a few basic requirements in terms of setbacks and whatever. So the original owner has permission and had permission to partition 2 extra lots and build a total of 3 homes on each lot, 1 on each lot.
Correct.
Okay. So since we don't recognize the dwelling, I'm looking for I understand the clustering of the parcels, in the partition process, but I'm looking for the requirement of siting dwellings and clustering the dwellings together.
So in 11, if we read condition 11, because the property is located in an exclusive farm use zone, measure 49 requires new home sites to be clustered, so as to maximize suitability of the remnant lot or parcel for farm and forest use. So the home sites have to be clustered.
Okay, and is that the understanding of the actual home, not they don't mean the parcels, they mean the home?
Well, yeah, I
Okay.
agree with his reading that it says home sites to be clustered. I can try to give kind of a synopsis of what our understanding is of the requirements, if you like.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe we'll wait on that. I'm just trying to make sure I get my questions out. Commissioners, any further questions for Mr. Strunk?
No, thank you, but I would like Director Friday to follow up on that
Okay.
requirement. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay,
May I say something
Sure,
just in
yeah.
closing? The problem here is that clustering has to be considered. It has to be, and it wasn't. The planning commission found that it wasn't relevant at this stage. But I think if you read the measure 49 order carefully, and remember, this is the only way you can get there from here. You're not allowed to partition the property under the zoning. This is the only way you can get there from here. This order was objectionable. It could have been objected to. It could have been appealed. If the applicant did not like this language, it could have been appealed if they didn't feel it was consistent, but this is it. We can't pick and choose what we want to consider in this order. I think it's pretty clear that the right to partition is conditioned upon the clustering requirement. And it simply wasn't considered here, and this record cannot support this partition because of that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, so I will call for any other testimony in opposition to the application. Okay, seeing and hearing none, we will move on to public agency reports.
Thank you, Chair. The county sanitarian noted that the newly created parcel will need to have an approved septic evaluation in order for the parcel to be considered buildable. The code enforcement officer submitted evidence of the unpermitted living area that we've discussed previously, and noted that at the time that living area was connected to an unpermitted septic system. And I think we've covered that it's been disconnected without permits, but the current owners are wanting to comply with the requirements to get a permit. And that concludes public agency reports.
Is there anything that would force removal of the building? It seems like you just have to remove the elements.
Yeah, I think the two options would be to either apply for that area to meet the building code standards for a residence, or to completely decommission it, get those permits for the decommissioning, and use it as the agricultural structure it was permitted as.
Okay, and now we will take any rebuttal by the applicant.
Thank you. I'm not a lawyer, so bear with me. Just want to comment about the clustering. In the final order and home authorization, item 11 that was referenced, it says Measure 49 requires new home sites to be clustered so as to maximize suitability of the remnant lot or parcel for farm or forest use. Now, they have done that. The 1.66 acre parcel has been clustered next to the original 1.12 acre parcel, I think it is, something like that. So as to maximize suitability of the remnant lot, the now 21 and change acre parcel, for farm or forest use. It goes on and says Measure 49 authorizes the owner to cluster some or all of the authorized lots, parcels, or dwellings that would otherwise be located on land in EFU zone. I'm not sure if that applies here or not, but if it does, it only applies to the one. It says some or all. It gives you the opportunity. It's only in that statement that it mentions dwellings. For the county to read this new home site and determine that that somehow refers to an actual home to be clustered, and yet not give any guidance about where, what does it mean? Clustering is very cut and dried when you're talking about parcels, because parcels have lines. They have surveyed boundary lines, but a home doesn't. And so if you were to somehow read that to refer to a home, you're left with this arbitrary thought of, so clustered where? 30 feet from the property line, 50? I mean, at what point are you not clustered? Is it just in the general area? Laws are not written to be nebulous like that, at least in my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. I am in agreement that this did not need to be considered, because I don't think when it says home site, it refers to dwelling. I think it refers to the parcel that the dwelling is located on. Furthermore, the intent of that was to maximize the suitability of the remnant lot or parcel for farm or forest use. To require a dwelling to be clustered or located at the southern end of this property would in essence strip the owner of the right to determine what part of the property is best suited or least usable for orchard use. It would in essence lock me in to putting a home where it is only already used as an orchard, and there is no area up on that end of the property that could conceivably be used otherwise. Whereas if you were to put, there is parts of the property that gets closer to the river where you can't farm anyway. Not easy to farm on that ground. So it does kind of, it creates a standard that in my view, simple reading, it doesn't meet the intent of the law to maximize the suitability of the remnant lot or parcel. The other thought about that is the lot in question. I think the neighbor, the appellant, is probably okay with the 1.66 acre lot. It's a home on the larger lot, which is their concern, and I get that. I understand that. You want to have good neighbors. But the remnant lot is its own issue here. requires new home sites to be clustered. That's the 1.66 acre lot, so as to maximize the suitability of the remnant lot or parcel for farm or forest use, which is the larger lot. I'm getting a little long-winded here. I'm sorry. In my view, to add restrictions or add conditions about where a dwelling is located on the parcel goes above and beyond what the law requires. That would be our view. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the testimony and evidence in the record, staff finds that the applicant has successfully demonstrated that the proposed land partition is consistent with the Yamhill County Land Division Ordinance and the Measure 49 Final Order standards. Staff recommends approval of the land partition request with the following conditions of approval. Condition number 1, a final partition plat pursuant to the requirements of the Yamhill County Land Division Ordinance shall be prepared and submitted to the planning director. The final partition plat shall substantially conform to the preliminary map. The Yamhill County Planning Docket number P-03-23 shall appear on the face of the plat. Condition number 2, prior to final partition approval, the survey of parcel 1, the 1.66 acre lot, shall be completed by a registered land surveyor pursuant to section 6.120 of the Yamhill County Land Division Ordinance. Condition number 3, the site evaluation for a subsurface sewage disposal system shall be approved by the county sanitarian for parcel number 1. The septic system on parcel number 1 shall be located on the individual lot and maintain the minimum setback requirements of 10 feet from all new property lines. If the 10-foot minimum setbacks from the property lines cannot be maintained, a properly recorded easement will be required pursuant to section 6.100 of the Land Division Ordinance. Condition number 4, the establishment of a dwelling on parcel number 1 under Measure 49 is subject to conditions described in Final Order and Home Site Authorization number E-131580. Condition number 5, prior to final plat approval, the applicant shall demonstrate conformance with standard 1, 2, 3, or 4 of subsection 6.090 of the Land Division Ordinance. Either domestic water shall be provided to each lot by a community water system or an on-site well or wells with the location of the wells indicated on the face of the plat, or the following disclosure shall be placed on the plat. No municipal public utility, community water supply, or private system will be provided to the purchaser of these lots noted hereon. Each lot not provided with a well or community water service shall be so identified. Condition number 6, prior to final plat approval, the landowner shall sign an affidavit acknowledging the following declaratory statement and recorded in the deed and mortgage records for Yamhill County. Quote, the subject property is located in an area designated by Yamhill County for agricultural and forest uses. It is the county policy to protect agricultural and forest operations from conflicting land uses in such designated areas. Accepted agricultural and forest practices in this area may create inconveniences for the owners or occupants of this property. However, Yamhill County does not consider it the agricultural or timber operator's responsibility to modify accepted practices to accommodate the owner or occupants of this property, with the exception of such operators' violation of state law, end quote. Condition number 7, prior to final plat approval, the applicant shall either decommission the unlawfully built living area established in the agricultural building located on parcel number 2, or the applicant shall obtain all necessary building, septic, and land use permits for the structure and living area contained therein. Decommissioning the structure means the following: A, obtain a building permit and all required inspections to change the occupancy from a dwelling to a non-residential use. B, remove the cooking stove, oven, and range hood. C, remove bathing facilities or the drain pipe under each and every bathing tub and or shower in the house to be cut below the tub and or shower pan. A cap be affixed to the cut area and quickcrete poured from the tub and or shower pan into the drain pipe so that the drain is filled from the new cap up to the shower pan or tub surface, and the subsurface sewage disposal system shall be abandoned and filled by approved means as prescribed by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And that concludes the recommended conditions.
I guess I do want to add that I'm thinking, maybe not recommending condition number 7. And the reason is that, we view this as a partitioning, and I don't want to make a condition that would be a basis for an appeal. And the idea of condition number 7 was to give the previous owner the option about whether to establish it as a dwelling or to remove it as a dwelling. And, whether that condition is there or not, the law is still there. And I do trust the new owner to follow through and to decide how to best resolve that issue. The applicant is right. There's no guidance on clustering in the code. We view this just as a partitioning, and as a partitioning, we're viewing just where is that lot going? Where is the new lot going? And the opponents did object to it going close to their property line. We understand that. We talked to the applicant about it, and they moved it to the southern property line where the other one was located. But we don't view the remnant parcel to require the clustering. Now, maybe we're wrong. Maybe the courts will view that we need to identify where that is. But I would note that under condition 12 of the approval, the last line of it says, a dwelling lawfully created based on a home site approval is a permitted use. The way we treat the remnant parcel is that a dwelling is a permitted use on that property. And that permitted use just has to meet the setback requirements. It's not that we direct where that dwelling goes. And it's not that we put down conditions, especially on a partitioning, on where that dwelling goes. And I would note that, one of the issues that was written about was, well, they didn't identify where the future structures would be. And on a Measure 49, it's unique in that, they gave an approval for a dwelling, but they also wanted to make sure that it wasn't something that would be tripped up by some technicality. And I would direct your attention to the second sentence on condition number 1. And it says the establishment of land division or dwelling based on the home site authorization must comply with all applicable standards governing the siting or development of the land division or dwelling. However, those standards must not be applied in a manner that prohibits the establishment of the land division or dwelling unless the standards are reasonably necessary to avoid or abate a nuisance, to protect public health or safety, or to carry out federal law. And I would note that, the placement of a septic system, I think, is a health and safety standard and something that we need to address when there's partitioning done. Where that dwelling goes on that remnant parcel, we've never done any enforcement on, never done any sort of requirement on. This is unique in that this issue has never come up on a Measure 49, and we probably have processed 100 Measure 49 partitionings. And if they appealed it, they might win. But I will say we have never gone to that extent on the remnant parcel. We've only looked at the clustering requirements on the parcels to be established. And in this partitioning, I don't see a way to put down a condition that says where that third dwelling is going to go. And I kind of would wonder, what would we even put down as far as the location? Does it have to be within 30 feet of the southern property line of the newly established parcel? Does it have to be within 100 feet? Does it have to be within 300 feet? There's no guidance on what clustering is in the state law.
I'm going to chime in. So I went and looked up Measure 49. It looks like perhaps the state used some poor language when they issued their Measure 49. It does say, I would never imagine, but now I lost it. If the property is an exclusive farm use or zone or mixed farm, the new lots or parcels created must be clustered so as to maximize suitability. So that's the state law. And they put home sites in here for some reason, I don't know. So my recommendation to the board is that you do make a determination as to whether or not that requirement was met. That's my recommendation.
Right, but the question becomes, the remaining larger lot is not Measure 49.
I want to make sure before we get into discussion, we're not there yet, so.
But I think Jody's saying that, you know, in the original Measure 49 language, the notation about the home site being clustered was not in the original Measure 49 language. Is that my
No,
understanding?
That's correct. That is not in state law that implemented Measure 49.
But it was put into the order by,
Their order used the word home site probably as an oversight, would be my guess. But they did use the term remnant lot, which matches statute.
I'm assuming we have no request to keep the record open.
that's correct.
Okay, so I will go ahead and close the hearing and open us up for deliberation. I guess I'm going to ask the opposite, if the opposite were true. So if there was no partition application, would a home site be a dwelling? Would a dwelling be allowed, let's say, in the existing location of the shed? Or somewhere near that?
Somewhere near that.
Okay,
At least we would sign off on a dwelling as long as it met 30-foot setback
Right.
in that zone under the Measure 49.
okay. And if that dwelling existed today, I'm setting aside the illegal nature of whatever's there, but if it existed today, the property owner would still have the right to partition this sort of final lot from the Measure 49 claim. And the way that I read it is the whole point of clustering was to make sure that if the property owner was interested in development or a neighborhood or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it, but development, that you wouldn't just have these sporadic homes across, you know, a large piece of ag land that was supposed to be maintained for agricultural purposes. So clustering would allow for very small parcels together.
Correct.
But that doesn't remove the ability and right of the property owner to build a home on the remnant lot, what I call the original lot, if they so choose.
That has been our interpretation, correct?
Okay. Commissioner's thoughts on that part of it? Because it seems like if the opposite were true and there was already a dwelling there, that we wouldn't be talking about this. That the requirement to have the partition would be in the same exact spot that it's being proposed to be in. That makes sense.
Yeah, I have no argument with that. I just had a question. We had a conversation yesterday, well, a brief conversation. Basically, my question was around the clustering aspect. And it seemed to me, before we heard more information today, that it was almost dismissed by the planning department and the planning commission. It was dismissed as an element of this, and that was my concern.
You know, I think the applicant's attorney argued that, look, we're dealing with a partitioning, we're not dealing with a home site. And so that was what was the kind of the focus of the planning commission, is the focus of our office, that we're dealing with a partitioning. I don't think they ignored it. I think they decided, look, we're only being asked to locate where this parcel is. And so they tried to answer that by, well, that parcel needs to be next to the other parcel that was created, but they weren't ignoring the objection. They were just saying that that objection does need to come later when there is a dwelling placed on there. But I also know Mr. Strunk is correct that we don't send notice out on dwellings, so.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So if that's not typically what our policy is it something that we could either add, or does it not even factor into this discussion at the end of the day?
I am really hesitant to add something like that to someone that has objected. I think, if the opponents are going to object. They probably ought to object at this point, and try to argue at circuit court that, that this is, somehow violates and that we need to consider where that dwelling is going to be located. I don't really want to make a whole nother system for us to send notice out, but I would also defer a bit to our legal counsel on her thoughts.
Mhm. I don't, I'm with you. I think you might open Pandora's box, but I don't think that you're necessarily, there's nothing that I've seen that says you can't. Just be, not that I think this is going to come up a lot because we don't have very many Measure 49 claims coming forward, but know that it could set a precedent.
Yeah.
I'm not asking it to be added. I'm just, I wanted to make sure that it was something we didn't do prior to this, and it seems like we don't.
I see these as two separate issues. What the planning commission originally was looking at was, I guess, literal. Before them was lot partition, not a home site. And so it's hard to have the argument with the home site when that's not before you. And so I believe they made the right decision. And I think that's the direction that I'm going to go, is that what we're looking at in front of us is a lot partition. Now, down the road, will they, somebody's eventually going to have to find out, where the location of the house is going to be, but that's not part of our purview right now. We can't just assume. And so it's tough, but before us right now is a lot partition, and that's what we're approving or not.
Agreed.
And can I ask questions about the bordering property? Is that not cool? So, I mean, just this aerial, there's 3 houses on that. Is that a Measure 49 or?
I don't recall.
They were not. I don't recall.
Are you talking
Sorry.
about to the north?
Yes.
The neighboring lots in the northwest corner adjacent to the remnant property on the.
So,
We don't know.
yeah, okay, that's fine.
They were not Measure 49, but I don't recall how.
But it looks like there's an easement through the prior owner Christensen property to get to that, to those homes. Okay.
So is that what we're looking at here? This dotted line is an easement?
That's an easement, yeah. And the initial request by Christensen's was to have the 1.6 acre lot located just north of that easement to make use of that easement drive that's already in place. So I think their initial logic was that lot in the northwest corner would have preserved more farmland because it's not very farmable. And so that's why they were wanting to place it there. And that was before the objection to that location. And that's when they amended it to the south following that objection.
Yeah, I think the hurdle for me is that question, so if that dwelling, if a dwelling did exist already where the shed is, and they then had gone through this process of wanting a partition to partition a parcel, could you make the case that the clustering requirement would then, that would have been the most
I think,
logical spot?
I think we need to go back to, are we trying to figure out if the homes, the dwellings were clustered in my read of state law and poorly written Measure 49 order is that's not required of the board here today to determine whether or not a dwelling, an unlawfully placed dwelling even, is clustered. It's just the parcels themselves. So the remnant lot. You need to look at whether or not this partition would leave a remnant lot that maximizes suitability for farm or forest use. That's the question.
And I think, but my point is that one of the hurdles for me is that if the applicant were to withdraw this request and proceed with siting and building a home, let's say where the existing shed is, presumably they could do that. And they have a right to do that. They could then come back and ask to partition a parcel. And where would we say that needs to go based on the clustering requirement? We would probably say it needs to go right here. So it doesn't, I don't see where the home site, the actual dwelling, is part of the clustering.
My read of the laws is that is not, there is additional statutes that do talk about dwelling clusterings, but that is for multiple properties and it's not really applicable here, not in my opinion.
Okay.
Probably why it wasn't in the Measure 49 order.
Okay. So, Ken, you talked about number 7, which is kind of the requirements around decommissioning.
Yeah, I would just say our recommendation is to go for conditions 1 through 6, because number 7 does allude to that you could put the dwelling in the, that's really already there, in the barn. I don't want to have that as be an issue on a partitioning when we're saying that it's only about the partitioning. So I would rather strike that condition, even though I argued strongly for it at the planning commission. I'd rather strike it and not have it be a future issue on any future appeal, and we would just take it through our regular process.
Okay. And that is in the code enforcement process right now?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And in which Mr. Moore has been very receptive and knows what he needs to do. So.
Any further questions?
No.
Okay.
No.
Do I have a motion? I'm trying to see what the language would be. Just a second. So I guess the motion would be to uphold. Well, it wouldn't be to uphold the
Staff
planning,
recommendation
Yeah.
But the staff
minus the-
recommendation
minus,
was changed.
with conditions 1 through 6.
So how would we need to word that?
And do you want the new property owner's name in it or?
Motion to approve, oh, hold, I'm too quiet. Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Deny the appeal.
Deny the appeal. I mean, I will write this out in a board order, so if it's not perfect, that's okay. When I bring the findings forward.
And approve the
Trying to
application.
think the best way to kick out the 7.
Right.
Without condition number 7 included. And then I'll clean it up in the board order.
So moved.
I didn't even hear a motion. Did you actually say it?
I'll move that we approve the staff recommendation to deny the appeal, approve the application with conditions 1 through 6.
And note for the record, the new
New applicants are
owners.
the new owners, the new applicants, the new owners.
Is that satisfactory?
Yep.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. Motion passes. So we should set findings
Yes, and no, Noelle is going to be gone. And we're coming up on Christmas. I could probably get it done by the 21st.
December 21st?
Yeah.
That works for everybody? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will bring us back into our formal agenda. Okay, so we are back in our formal agenda. I want to pick up at announcements. So we haven't been in here for 3 weeks. It's been a while. I just want to again thank the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde for hosting the Yamhill City County Dinner earlier in the month. And their hospitality is always wonderful. And thanks for allowing us to bring all of our gifts and offload them from the one we were supposed to have. Real quick, not a whole lot happening over the holiday, but I am working on supporting our county assessor, Derek Wharf, in seeking clarification from the Department of Revenue regarding the way that we handle assessed value exemptions. This is something that's been going on for many years. But unfortunately, there seems to be an effort by the Department of Revenue to implement a rule change. And that rule change will disproportionately affect active duty military members. So in this state, if you are an active duty military member, you can apply for an assessed value exemption while you are serving. And the exemption is quite significant. I think it's over $100,000 of exemption. And wonderful that we offer that. However, with these new rule changes, when that military member is no longer an active duty member, the switch back into or out of that exemption could be a significant financial hit for them. So this is something that the assessors across the state have been trying to work on with the Department of Revenue. Senator Boquist is aware of it. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to require a constitutional amendment. So we're hoping that the legislature has the desire to put that on the ballot and have the voters of Oregon sort of fix that so that we're not penalizing our military members. So more on that coming up for this special session. And any other announcements?
A number of years ago, the county wound up transferring some lots into the city of Dayton to the city to use for affordable or workforce housing. Nothing was ever done with that. There was a discussion with the housing authority, but at this point, Community Home Builders is looking to submit a proposal because the city is is putting out an RFP for someone to develop the 10 lots, which were originally 12 lots, to make into low income for very low income and low income families. So I wrote a letter of support because their program, I've seen a number of them in Carlton, Amity, Lafayette, Sheridan, and McMinnville. And so I have written a letter of support for them. We continue with our local government advisory committee and our HHS summits to discuss issues around Measure 110 and behavioral health concerns. The child care project continues. I have to say our economic development manager, Joya Goodrum, has been wonderful in pulling all this together, but we're getting more and more information about other child care programs, extensive ones that have existed in the county that perhaps we were not aware of. And the point in time count, YCAP is gearing up for that. That will begin on Wednesday, January 24th. It's important because it secures private and state and federal funding. And also an update on Stratus Village to the Housing Authority, and that closing date has been pushed back to March 31st. So that's the new date. Hopefully it will close sooner.
Great, thank you.
And you can volunteer for the point in time count too, right?
Yes.
Yep, you can volunteer and you can host a site.
Oh,
So you can go on the YCAP website and there'll be information about either being part of the census or hosting a site.
We learned just how important that is during the last legislative session.
so I got one and I forwarded you the email to everybody, but I just want to publicly, since I mentioned it over the last 6 months about phase 2 of the bypass and the Parkway Committee and Dave Hageberg really spearheading our issues that we're having on the delay for the project labor agreement, which was being held up by the community workforce agreement. It sounds like we're finally starting to get some progression on that with the Oregon Transportation Commission. Thanks to Rep. Scharf, Dave, super kudos to Dave for really spearheading and trying to light some fires under some people. Anna Henson at ODOT, Andrew, our regional solutions director, Beth Wojtowski, reached out to me and I sent her to Anna to get more information on it. So it was definitely group approach to bring awareness to what was going on, but we've been assured by the Oregon Transportation Commission that this will be done before the holidays, this community workforce agreement, which
Before,
will then parlay into the next agreement, which is the project labor agreement with the union.
before Christmas holidays?
It says holidays.
How many holidays are they considering?
Easter.
I'm not like this is over. My fingers are crossed because knowing how government schedules work and timelines for it, it drives me nuts.
Mhm.
And it still doesn't add up. But I have hope that if Dave has told me that he feels okay about it as it sits right now and what he's been told, then everybody's been told to in the interim, stand down, but be ready to apply pressure if we don't get where we need to go.
Mhm.
Because there's $32 million at stake
Mhm.
by
Yeah.
the end of next year, December 2024. So that's where that's at.
I'm glad all the partners are coming together
Yes.
to apply pressure. Any other announcements?
Will Minor Parade on Saturday.
Saturday? Yep.
I'll be there.
I just want to say that the day before Thanksgiving, which is a very hectic day for most people, we welcomed home a young man in our community who is facing cancer. And I don't know that it was widely publicized that he was going to be coming home, but we lined up outside of his home and the Dayton Fire District was there to help welcome him home. And I turn around and Commissioner Johnston is walking up with his wife, Carol Lee. And it was very touching to see that because I didn't know that you were going to be there. And it's just an honor to serve with you. You have such a big heart and I'm honored to serve with both of you.
Thank you. Well, I know that our staff is very honored to serve with Commissioner Johnston because yesterday Kit came into the office and our legal assistant said, "Kit's here." And I said, "I've never gotten that reaction." But Kit is well loved. We saw that at the
I think
at
it's a
the
secret
city,
candy I
the
get.
city county dinner when every table stood up and just sung your praises. So it is absolutely, you have been such an asset to this board.
Well, I appreciate that. It is reciprocal. I really appreciate working with everybody here, including my two counterparts, because it's fantastic. And it's one of the bigger reasons that once I got going in this, that it will keep me going because I enjoy doing this.
Mhm.
And this is on top of running a farm.
Mhm.
Yep.
So I enjoy it. And every time somebody asks me, they think I'm crazy for running to start with because they know that the obligations I have with the farm. And I'm like, no, I love it. It's something different every single day. I enjoy it. I'm not going anywhere.
Great, thank you.
All right. And with that, I think we are adjourned. I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for November 30th, 2023, and it is 12:49. Thank you.